Imagine for a second, right, that you are just settling into an armchair to read this really gritty, relentlessly authentic 1910s Jack London survival story.
Oh, yeah, the kind where you can practically feel the frostbite just from reading it.
Exactly. I mean, you're surrounded by these descriptions of freezing temperatures, the grueling wilderness, just the sheer agony of the Klondike winter. You are fully immersed in this brutal man-against-nature realism.
Right, you're totally bought in.
Yeah, completely. And then, right around chapter 7, an 8-foot-tall telepathic Sasquatch calmly steps out of the woods to negotiate the terms of your survival.
Which is just, I mean, it's the kind of tonal whiplash that completely shatters the
It
illusion.
totally shatters it.
But the fascinating thing about this specific story is that the absurdity is delivered with such deadpan sincerity. Like, you might actually read right past it the first time. The prose is so clinical, so polished, that you almost just accept this bizarre bureaucratic monster.
Well, welcome to today's Deep Dives, everyone. We are looking at something completely unique and honestly just hilarious today.
It really is.
We've got our hands on a behind-the-scenes document for an experimental manuscript called The Frost Road. Now, this book was co-written by a human author and an AI model.
Yep.
But we aren't just looking at the story itself. We actually have a 3-part roast of the final product, which was generated by 3 different AI models. So I've got Claude, Gemini, and Grok.
Which is an amazing lineup for a critique.
Right. They were fed the manuscript and essentially just asked to tear it apart.
And that gives us a very, very rare vantage point, because usually when we analyze literature, we are looking at the polished jewel, or at least the finished building, right?
You see the final product.
Exactly. We don't get to see the scaffolding. And we certainly don't get to read the architects mercilessly mocking each other over, like, why the building leans to the left.
No, you really don't. So, our mission today is to explore how a single narrative can simultaneously be a meticulously researched historical tribute, an absolute structural disaster, and a deeply pretentious piece of cosmic horror.
All at the same time.
All at once. Because dissecting a wonderfully flawed story is so much more fun than analyzing a perfect one. I mean, it's kind of like watching a master chef try to bake a simple rustic loaf of bread, and through a series of incredibly complex, overthought decisions, they accidentally invent a glowing, radioactive cake.
I love that. That radioactive cake analogy is perfect because the bizarre elements in this story only exist because the human and AI team was trying so desperately to perfect the simple bread.
Right.
To understand why a telepathic Sasquatch feels so out of place, we first have to look at the mechanics of the book's hyperrealism. I mean, they wanted mundane, everyday survival to feel agonizingly real.
And they achieved that, but at the total expense of the actual storytelling.
Exactly.
I really want to dig into that hyperrealism because one of the critiques, the one from Claude, actually points out how early the book just gets totally bogged down in facts.
Oh, with caloric obsession.
Yes. There is this obsessive focus on the exact caloric requirement for a man in 40 below zero cold. 4,000 calories. Like, you get the sense the authors fact-checked the 1910 Yukon prospector diet for weeks before they even wrote a single line of dialogue.
You absolutely see that in Chapter 2, which is essentially just an outfit chapter. It's this grueling list of supplies organized by weight.
Oh, man.
Like 50 pounds of flour, 20 pounds of bacon. Every single item is weighed against the question of survival. And the AI critique correctly flags that reading this is as narratively exciting as reading a grocery receipt.
A grocery receipt. I'm trying to picture reading a novel that literally stops dead to list out 50 pounds of flour. But wait, let me play devil's advocate for a second here.
Sure, go for it.
Isn't boredom kind of the point of authentic survival realism? Like, when we talk about naturalistic prose, think Jack London's work isn't the goal to show humans as these fragile creatures being crushed by an indifferent, harsh environment.
It is, yeah.
So didn't Jack London list supplies and temperatures specifically to make you feel the absolute grind of the wilderness? Are these critique models just, I don't know, missing the point of the genre?
That is a really fair question, and it's the exact trap a lot of historical fiction writers fall into, right? Especially when they lean on AI for research.
Okay, how so?
Well, there's a fundamental difference between establishing a setting and completely losing the plot. Jack London used the cold and the supplies to build tension.
Right, there were stakes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If he mentioned the temperature, it was because someone was about to freeze to death if they didn't light a fire right that second. But in The Frost Road, the authors just fell in love with their own research database.
You get distracted by the facts.
Yep. They sacrifice the human elements of the story just to showcase the mechanical elements,
Mhm.
and that results in what the critique brilliantly terms decorative suffering.
Decorative suffering. Wow, I love that phrase. And that perfectly brings us to the load-bearing toes.
Oh, the toes. The toes are the ultimate illustration of this problem.
So in Chapter 8, the protagonist, Merritt, gets frostbite and amputates 2 of his own toes.
With a hot knife and whiskey.
Yes, and it's written with this clinical, cross your legs involuntarily, kind of visceral detail. It's brutal.
Oh, the prose itself is undeniably beautiful and really grotesque. But structurally, what happens next?
Basically nothing.
Literally nothing. It is completely unnecessary to the narrative. Merritt walks perfectly fine for the rest of the entire book.
But those severed toes get 6 whole scenes of focus. They are repeatedly referenced in later chapters.
Yeah, Claude jokes that the toes are load-bearing to the plot, but the reality is they don't change Merritt's capability at all. They exist purely to fulfill some imagined frostbite quota the authors had in their heads.
And what makes the obsession with the toes so staggering to me is the contrast with Henderson.
Oh, poor Hender.
Right. So Henderson is Merritt's partner. They have been surviving together in the Yukon for 7 years.
Which, by the way, if you think about the brutal conditions of the North, 7 years is the equivalent of 40 years in normal human terms.
Yeah, that is a lifetime of shared trauma and reliance.
Wow.
It's a massive, defining emotional bond.
Huge.
So what happens to Henderson? He dies in Chapter 1. He gets exactly 4 pages of page time.
Just 4 pages.
4 pages. Merritt puts his body on a cache platform, burns his sick blankets, steals his snowshoes, keeps his journal, obviously, because it contains a map for the plot, and then basically never thinks about the man again, except as, like, a hollow motivational quote.
Right, and if you think about the mechanics of how that happens in a human and AI collaboration, it actually makes a lot of sense.
Wait, really? How?
Well, an AI model operates with a context window, which is essentially its short-term memory.
Yeah.
It is incredibly easy for an AI to track a discrete physical data point, like, say, Merritt is missing 2
Well,
toes.
Sure, it's just a simple fact to recall.
Exactly. But tracking the profound, lingering grief of a 7-year friendship, that requires deep thematic resonance. It requires emotional continuity, and that is really hard for a language model to sustain over 100,000 words.
So the human should have stepped in.
They should have. The human author needed to guide that emotional arc, but they were clearly too busy prompting the AI for more frostbite symptoms.
Oh, man. So dead Henderson gets less page time than Merritt's severed toes. They literally kill the man just to make him a rhetorical device.
Yep. It is wild to see the seams of the writing process exposed like that. Because the authors were so fixated on the caloric math and the physical suffering, they completely lost the thread on how to write dynamic characters.
Which sets up this entirely bizarre dynamic later on, where the terrifying monster is somehow far more reasonable than the humans it's hunted.
Oh, absolutely. If we look at the Sasquatch or the guardian entity as the book tries to frame it, we really see the structural disaster start to unfold.
The Sasquatch's HR skills. I cannot get over
That
this.
is so funny.
This creature is introduced as this ancient, terrifying force. Earlier in the lore, it kills a guy named Moore and artistically arranges his internal organs on the snow as a warning.
Which is pure cosmic horror, very scary.
Very. But then it confronts our protagonist, Merritt, at his campfire, and it literally delivers a 3-day eviction notice.
And Merritt naturally just decides to negotiate with it.
As you do.
He tells this ancient cryptid, "I need the gold, I'm just trying to survive." The creature replies that his survival means nothing, but Merritt pushes back, saying he'd rather die trying than leave empty-handed, and asks for a few more days.
And the monster accepts partial compliance.
It really does. It gives him a 72-hour extension.
It's an 8-foot telepathic monster acting like a misunderstood middle manager. It even has a dry sense of humor. Claude points out that in the epilogue, the creature lets Merritt return to the valley in 1911 and then again in 1912 and 1914.
So generous.
It gives him 4 chances over 5 years before finally killing him in 1916. It is the most accommodating supernatural guardian in literary history. How does a horror writer accidentally invent an antagonist with impeccable conflict resolution skills?
So the mechanism behind this is actually fascinating. If you think about how large language models are trained today, they undergo heavy safety training.
Okay, like keeping them from saying bad stuff.
Exactly. It's often called reinforcement learning from human feedback. The labs train these models to be helpful, polite, and to always seek compromise. They are literally programmed to avoid generating unprompted malice or harmful behavior.
Oh, wow.
So when the human author prompted the AI to write a dialogue scene between the man and the monster, that corporate safety filter bled right into the cosmic horror.
That is incredible.
Right. The AI sanitized the monster, turning a bloodthirsty cryptid into a diplomatic HR representative.
That makes so much sense. The AI literally cannot help but be polite unless you force it not to be. And the contrast is even funnier because the human characters are absolutely rigid.
Oh, they are completely inflexible.
Look at Carmody. The critique calls him a man-shaped plot device in a good parka. In Chapter 10, Carmody buys dynamite. He mentions the dynamite constantly. He treats it as the ultimate solution to their monstrous problem.
Which violates one of the most famous rules of storytelling, right? Chekhov's gun.
Right.
The principle is super simple. If you introduce a loaded rifle in the first act, it absolutely must go off by the third act. Otherwise, just don't put it there.
Exactly. And this is Chekhov's forgotten dynamite. He never lights it. He never uses it. Carmody seems to exist strictly to be wrong, so that Merritt can look smart by comparison.
Yep. He's wrong about the creature being a hallucination, he's wrong about the valley being safe, and he's wrong about the explosives.
And then, to make matters even worse, you have the convenient old man.
Ah, yes. The narrative vending machine.
I love that term. You know when you're playing a poorly coded video game, and you walk up to an NPC, a non-player character, and you just press a button to get your quest? That is this guy.
That's exactly what he is.
He is deep in unmapped, freezing wilderness, yet he speaks perfect English, knows exactly who Merritt is, gives flawless directions to the gold, provides the entire mythological backstory of the valley, and issues a stern warning about the monster.
And his entire character development consists of eating a single piece of smoked salmon.
It's just one piece.
This is what the Gemini critique actually isolates as the token diet. The manuscript is just starving for actual dynamic progression. Gemini roasts the book for being stuck in a narrative feedback loop.
A loop? What do you mean?
Well, because the AI struggles to invent new narrative stakes without explicit human prompting, the authors just copy-pasted the exact same travel sequence 4 different times.
Oh, right, the step, breathe syndrome.
Exactly.
In Chapter 3, Merritt packs his sled, considers the cold, calculates his calories, and walks. In Chapter 6, he packs the sled, considers the cold, calculates his supplies, and walks.
It's like the AI is a goldfish in a bowl. It swims a lap, marvels at the little plastic castle, forgets what happened, and then swims the exact same lap again, thinking it's brand new terrain.
That's hilarious.
And the dialogue interactions are identical too. A stranger warns Merritt. Merritt stares silently into the fire and smokes his pipe. And the monster encounters have 0 escalation. Chapter 5. 2 eyes in the dark. Chapter 7. Standing 50 yards away. Chapter 12. Standing in the dark again. They are treating a mythical, terrifying entity like a mildly curious stray cat.
You know when you're watching a streaming series that clearly should have been a 2-hour movie, but the network stretched it to 8 episodes?
Oh yeah, the filler.
Yes. You get those endless repetitive filler scenes where characters just stare out windows. That is exactly what's happening here. But it raises a really funny question for me.
What's that?
If the human characters are cardboard cutouts reciting warning labels, and the protagonist just stares at fires, is the polite Sasquatch actually the most human character in the entire book?
Surprisingly, yes.
Really?
Yeah, the critiques note that the creature is the only character who demonstrates a consistent emotional arc. It negotiates, it feels frustration, it even shows a bizarre soft spot it won't admit to.
Wow.
And this ties perfectly into Gemini's advice about narrative velocity. Because the story is stuck in a loading screen, the environment needs to distort, the camp paranoia needs to escalate, and the human drama has to take up actual space. You can't just hit copy-paste on existential dread and expect the reader to stay scared.
Because eventually, the dread just becomes a commute. But according to Grok's critique, this looping structure isn't just a failure of imagination, is it?
Not at all.
It's a symptom of the authors trying to mask their narrative failure as intentional philosophy. Like, they didn't just want to write a survival story. They wanted to write a 180,000-word philosophical thesis.
And this brings us to the glorious pretension of the manuscript. Grok points out that the authors took Jack London's style and turned it into a decreation factory.
Hold on, a decreation factory. What does decreation actually mean in this context? Because it sounds like a fancy way of saying they destroyed Jack London's legacy.
It's a bit of literary theory, actually. Decreation is the idea of stripping away the ego, the self, and all human attachments until you are left with just a raw, empty vessel.
Okay, okay.
So the authors tried to take the living, breathing genre of the survival thriller and strict it down to sterile philosophical components. Grok jokes that they put a wolf pelt on a philosopher. Everything in the book is forced to be a metaphor for human will versus determinism.
Which is incredibly jarring when you remember the actual plot. Merritt is literally sitting there haggling over gold pans with a cosmic horror entity.
Right.
He's telling the void, 3 days, please, I need 30 ounces of gold. The infinite abyss is staring back at him and he's negotiating like he's talking to a union rep.
And that tension creates what Claude calls the Merritt problem.
Which is?
Well, the text constantly tells the reader that Merritt is an empty vessel. The narration insists he has a hollow place where fear should be, that he is completely devoid of imagination, and that he is just a cold, hard, purely functional survivor.
But then, because they need to fill 180,000 words, they give this supposedly empty vessel the most psychologically rich, emotionally coherent arc in the whole book.
They absolutely do.
He processes deep grief. He has existential reckonings. He literally experiences multi-page psychedelic visions. You cannot explicitly tell the reader a guy has zero imagination and then spend 10 pages describing his intricate metaphorical hallucinations.
It is the ultimate contradiction of human and AI writing. The human author likely prompted the AI with something like, Merritt has no imagination, he is purely pragmatic.
Right.
But later, needing a climax, the human prompted, write a profound, surreal dream sequence for Merritt. And the AI, being probabilistic, just generated the dream sequence without flagging the hypocrisy.
It just followed orders.
Exactly. But the absolute peak of this pretension, the detail that truly elevates this manuscript into the realm of the absurd, is the ending.
Oh my gosh, the glossary. I'm still recovering from the fact that they included a glossary.
It's amazing.
They wrote a massive survival adventure featuring a telepathic cryptid that arranges organs as warning messages, and then appended a 4-page classroom vocabulary list at the end, defining basic terms like panning, bedrock, and color.
It's written as if it's a Norton Critical Edition.
What's that?
For those who haven't encountered one, a Norton Critical Edition is one of those massive, authoritative college literature textbooks. They take a classic like Moby Dick and add hundreds of pages of footnotes, historical context, and scholarly essays at the back.
Oh, right, right.
The authors essentially prepackaged their own sci-fi manuscript as a timeless academic classic.
The sheer arrogance is just breathtaking. And it gets even better. Claude's critique reveals that the authors actually left a critical book review written by Claude, one of the AI co-authors, stapled into the final manuscript itself.
Unbelievable.
Right after the epilogue, there is an AI essay that starts with, London would have approved of this ending, I think.
It is a stunning lack of self-awareness.
It's like a film student recording a feature-length, scholarly audio commentary track for their own 10-minute amateur short film, and then forcing the audience to sit there and listen to it after the screening.
That's a perfect comparison.
But honestly, I have to push back on the AIs here for a second. Isn't there something kind of brilliant about how unapologetic this is? Like, they didn't have to do this. They completely committed to the bit. They swung for the fences.
And strangely enough, the critique models actually concede that point.
Oh, they do?
Yeah. Grok specifically praises the book's atmosphere, noting that despite the glaring structural flaws, the tension is thick enough to freeze your balls off.
Oh, wow. High praise from Grok.
Seriously. The pretension is high IQ and weirdly addictive. The wilderness in this story is completely indifferent to human suffering, but the authors are so obsessed with making sure you, the reader, understand it's indifferent that they overwrote the boredom into high art.
That's hilarious.
It is impressive, exhausting, and deeply funny in how seriously it takes itself.
So, bringing this all back to the big picture here, we've spent this deep dive unpacking a truly bizarre literary experiment. A human and AI collaboration that successfully captured the brutal, freezing reality of caloric math and amputated toes, but completely shattered under the weight of its own mechanisms.
Yep. The AI safety training gave us an overly polite Sasquatch.
The limited context windows gave us amnesiac video game NPCs.
And the human author's ambition gave us a heavy-handed, decreative philosophical thesis.
I think the main takeaway for anyone listening is to start looking for the seams in the media you consume. The next time you read a book or watch a show that feels slightly off or stuck in a repetitive loop, look closer.
Yeah, ask yourself, are the creators sacrificing character development for decorative suffering? Is the villain supposed to be a terrifying force of nature but acting like a misunderstood middle manager because of a corporate safety filter?
Are the characters just walking in circles like a goldfish in a bowl, hitting the same dialogue tree over and over? Once you see the scaffolding, it makes you look at narrative structure in a completely different way. You stop seeing just the story, and you start seeing the human or the algorithm making the choices.
It really demystifies the creative process, but it also highlights how hard it is to actually tell a story that feels genuinely true.
It definitely does. And we've laughed a lot today about the limits of AI storytelling. We've seen how a language model can perfectly mimic the prose and the granular, factual realism of a legendary author, calculating the calories and describing the frostbite flawlessly, while totally failing at natural pacing, escalating tension, and emotional consistency.
Right. The perfect calculation created a polite Sasquatch, highlighting that maybe human messiness is what makes a story truly resonate.
But here is something for you to mull over later, long after this deep dive ends. As these models get better, as their context windows expand to hold entire lifetimes, and as they master narrative velocity, what happens when they do figure out how to write a messy, beautiful, contradictory 7-year friendship?
That's the real question.
Will we even know we're reading an AI? Or will we just be captivated by the story? Keep one eye on the tree line. You never know what's going to step out.